Hello, everyone. My name is Rohith Yeleti, and I am currently a junior who is majoring in biology while also on a pre-medical track. This project was done by me, Liberty Rasmussen, and Will Rossetter. And this is our book review presentation on Black Food Geographies by Ashanti M. Reese. So some author background. The author of this book, Ashanti M. Reese, is a current anthropology professor at the University of Texas in the African and African Diaspora Studies Department. She is an anthropologist who received her PhD in anthropology in 2015 from American University with a focus on race, gender, and social justice. Her main field of anthropological research is mainly on Black geographies. That is, Black geographies are the ways people, or Black people, I should say, produce and navigate in their communities in the context of anti-Blackness and racism, which is very prevalent to society today. And more specifically on documenting how this racism and anti-Blackness constrains their life as a whole. The full title of the book is Black Food Geographies, Race, Self-Reliance, and Food Access in Washington, D.C. by Ashanti M. Reese. The book, Black Food Geographies, discusses the topic of food access in urban areas, and more specifically in the neighborhood of Deanwood in Washington, D.C. In this book, Reese talks about the issue of unequal food access and self-reliance and its link to systemic racism. The author uses a historical and anecdotal approach to her research in order to help give a better understanding of the issues that Deanwood and many other majority Black neighborhoods face in this country. This book uses an ethnographic research method where Reese becomes fully immersed in the Deanwood community. In the introductory chapter, Reese mentions that her research methods consisted of semi-structured interviews, participant observation, archival research, and surveying. With this research method, Reese was able to get the full story and picture as to why Black communities lack grocery stores. With these interviews, Reese shows what life is like and how the food system works by listening to the residents of Deanwood, rather than just looking into the outer statistics. In the intro, Reese talks about the term food desert, used by the government to determine places lacking grocery stores. Food deserts tend to show the distance between supermarkets, but they also fail to use demographics and race as a factor in there. In addition to this, there is also supermarket redlining, where supermarkets avoid low income, high crime areas because it provides minimal fiscal benefits to them. The term food apartheid looks into the more segregational racism and provides a more holistic view by looking at the geography, economics, faith, and race of the community. This holistic term allows for a crucial analysis of the structural causes behind food deserts in predominantly Black communities. The main thesis that Reese argues throughout the book is that predominantly Black communities have a lack of grocery stores due to systemic racism and anti-Blackness, rather than the mainstream narrative that these communities lack grocery stores because they're deserted, empty, and lacking. There is much evidence showing self-reliance within Deanwood and how the community has developed a sense of nothingness, or a more philosophical term, learned helplessness, where the community has the determined mindset that they have to fend for themselves, making for a less individualistic mindset that the American dream is about and that common American culture has today, and more of a mindset that everyone within the community needs to work together for the betterment of the community because they do not have any governmental support. Chapter 1 of the book is titled, Come to Think of It, We Were Pretty Self-Sufficient, Race, Segregation, and Food Access in a Historical Context. This chapter explores the history of the Deanwood food system in the context of the rise and fall of supermarkets over the last half of the 20th century, leading to improper structuralizing for function today. Prior to the introduction of supermarkets to Deanwood, the community's infrastructure depended on the Black, locally owned businesses, where they valued education and a stable social infrastructure. Industrialization of food led to supermarkets, which the Deanwood community began to rely heavily on instead of locally owned Black businesses. Eventually, this increase in food production and fiscal opportunity it presented to food corporations led them to leaving Deanwood for more suburban areas, which left them to rot and ending up going through a high crime phase of selling crack cocaine, leading to more bad stigmas and stereotypes. Deanwood would eventually shift back to its ways prior to big food corporations because they've learned that the community must stick to its self reliance because of the supermarkets coming and going, unfortunately. So, this whole chapter supports the main thesis that these Black communities are self reliant and not inactive like the general notion and mainstream notion, and that they're self reliant mainly due to the fact that food corporations are actively using systemic racism, as seen with this quote. By 1971, supermarkets reduced their stores by 24%. Supermarkets followed a national trend, choosing to leave predominantly Black inner city neighborhoods in favor of more affluent white suburban areas. By 1982, the number of major grocery stores had fallen to 33, down from 91 in 1968. This shows how systemic racism has led to Deanwood making its own food system and lacking grocery stores, not because of its inactivity, but because they don't bring as much profit as white suburban communities, posing the ethical dilemma of systemic racism.
Chapter 2 Overview. The title of Chapter 2 is There Ain't Nothing in Deanwood, Navigating Nothingness and the Unsafe Way. This chapter looked into how the residents of Deanwood navigated grocery shopping in an unequal food landscape. The chance of a full-service grocery store being nearby depends on where you live, and where you live is very dependent on race and class. This quote helps explain the unequal food landscapes that plague many minority communities in America. An important takeaway from this chapter was how the residents' expectations and preferences were important in understanding how the grocery stores just meeting the basic needs of residents is only the bare minimum and is not enough in terms of equality. Thesis evidence found in Chapter 2. Wards 7 and 8, both overwhelmingly Black, are ecologically isolated and disadvantaged compared to other wards in Washington, D.C. The neighborhood Deanwood is located in Ward 7, one of the two wards east of the Anacostia River, and only 3 supermarkets serve the nearly 150,000 residents in those 2 wards. So to put this into perspective, the city of Lafayette's population is only 72,000, and we have at least 10 grocery stores in just Lafayette, not even including West Lafayette. So it is clear that the unequal food access in Wards 7 and 8 are due to anti-Black racism and spatial segregation. Chapter 3 Overview. The title of Chapter 3 is What is Our Culture? I Don't Even Know, Nostalgia and Memory in the Evaluations of Food Access. This chapter focused on residents' memories of the past and how their past experiences with food access compared to their present experiences. Many residents recalled times where the food landscape was vibrant and was centered around community and family values, but their present experiences are not nearly as pleasant. An important takeaway from this chapter is that the residents' past experiences in a vibrant and booming food landscape shaped how they feel about the now unequal food access. Thesis evidence found in Chapter 3. In the past, Deanwood was self-sufficient. The neighborhood was very much a community, and their food landscape valued community cohesiveness. But gentrification led to many unwanted and negative changes within the community and family values. Big corporations such as Walmart had negative impacts on small businesses, and fast food changed family values, no longer making mealtimes the center of family life. Chapter 4 Overview. The title of Chapter 4 is He's Had That Store for Years, the Historical and Symbolic Value of the Community Market. This chapter focused on the importance of Mr. Jones in the community market. The community market is significant because the store owner, Mr. Jones, valued relationships with the customers over profits. And even though the residents of Deanwood didn't always financially support the community market, it was an important place for the residents to connect with each other. An important takeaway from this chapter is that Deanwood values community and togetherness, and the community market represented these values for the residents. Thesis evidence found in Chapter 4. The lack of Black-owned grocery stores in Deanwood, and in a lot of urban areas for that matter, was due to many things such as gentrification and competition with bigger supermarkets. So gentrification, a lot of predominantly Black neighborhoods are becoming predominantly white, and white residents are more likely to shop at bigger stores with more inventory because it's more convenient. And competition with bigger supermarkets, residents prefer to shop in one place where all their needs can be met, and a lot of small stores, such as the community market, can't provide that for its shoppers.
Chapter 5 is titled, We Will Not Perish, We Will Flourish, Community Garden, Self-Reliance, and Refusal. This chapter focuses on the creation of a community garden and the reason for creating it as a site of resistance in response to the public housing failure. The conclusion, on the other hand, speaks of the overall meaning of the oppression and injustice in the communities, leading to an overall lack of fresh fruit and groceries. It shows that there is a need for more movements and research in order to further progress into having a community that we can be proud of and that suits the opportunities for everyone in the community. Chapter 5 builds off the lack of groceries in Black communities because the garden reflects the tension in working under spatial and economic constraints. The garden becomes more of a symbolic approach to building a healthy community than being just a garden that produces food for the community. The gardeners themselves employed the self-reliance of the community in order to change the space, but more importantly, the people and the children of the community that come to help in the garden. The strength of this piece includes the detailed stories from real members of the Deanwood community, while also having these stories be full and real because the author created a trusting relationship over a very long extended period of time. It also added quality infographics to help better show the details of Deanwood's food landscape over the course of time. The one big weakness that is seen in this book is that it's very one-sided with no clear counter-argument from either a government official who oversees Deanwood and tries to make the changes or doesn't try to make the changes depending on what it looks like, or a nearby community that doesn't face the same difficulties as Deanwood and why that might be the case and what they're doing differently that's helping them avoid the same food desert kind of landscape. In my opinion, this book was very heartwarming because of the personality of both the author and her interviewees coming through in the text. Having that allowed me to really dive in and enjoy the book while also coming to understand the information about segregation of Deanwood and the systemic racism that occurs all across the United States and how that causes the Black communities to lack food and groceries for this case in particular. I would definitely recommend this book to anyone interested in the topic or anyone interested in learning more about how the Black communities are treated across America.
This book was very informative. Hearing the personal stories from residents of Deanwood made it easier to connect with the message that the book was trying to convey. I think that this book shed a lot of light on the issue of how systemic racism affects Black individuals in America. So I'd have to agree with Rohith that this book is most definitely a must-read.
I really enjoyed the narrative format of this book, as the more personalized methods and stories made it much easier to understand the author Reese's purpose and feel more sympathy towards the communities similar to Deanwood. The book is very credible, and I definitely say it's a must read, and it really opened up my mind on systemic racism and made me realize how ignorant the stigmas and stereotypes of Black communities are. Thank you for listening to our presentation on Black food geographies, and hope you enjoyed, and I hope everyone enjoys the much needed winter break.